So, good afternoon and welcome to our latest updates from the field. And today we are delighted to be joined by Mwase, who is the Interim National Director at Habitat Malawi. Thank you, Lucy, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share with us this afternoon. My name is Pete, and I will be handing over in just a few minutes to Lucy, who's going to share an update on the work of our long-term partners in Habitat Malawi. We do really thank all our participants and attendees for joining us this afternoon. We do really value your continued interest and support. Perhaps, and I know many of you have from looking at the names here, have travelled to Malawi in the past, and I know many hope to travel back to Malawi in the future. And I know many of you as well have supported Habitat Ireland's partnership with Habitat Malawi in other different ways. We are so grateful that you were able to join us for this update. There is going to be an opportunity to ask questions at the very end. This will be done through the chat function, which you can see at the bottom of your screen, or the Q&A option as well. Either works fine. Type your question at any stage, and I will then ask these after the presentation. If we do run out of time, we will endeavour to follow those up, any questions we may not get around to asking. So be thinking of questions as the presentation goes on, and please do use the chat function at the bottom to ask those. I was thinking earlier on about today, and I was reminded of the words of the Habitat CEO, Jonathan Rickford. And these are words that he shared at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in March. And this is what he said: "We recognise that we are all connected, where we act in solidarity in times of crisis. And this is no more true than in Habitat Ireland's strong partnership with Habitat Malawi, a link that goes back many, many years as we tackle together the need for safe, decent housing for all. A need that is highlighted even more during this ongoing pandemic. As people worldwide were urged to stay at home, this simply isn't possible for those living in homelessness and inadequate shelter. Our partnership with Habitat Malawi in the last 5 years has focused our support for the Orphaned and Vulnerable Children Program. And since October 2018, Big Build has travelled to Malawi. I know some of you here have travelled on that Big Build team as well. And that's provided an opportunity to build louder, calling attention to the global need for shelter and challenging the leaders in Malawi to respond, and at the same time building 10 homes in 2018 and again in 2019. We are thankful for the privilege of this partnership, and as we look forward, we are currently supporting the COVID response project, which Lucy is going to share a little about later on today. And that's only because of the support and the faithful support of supporters like yourselves here across Ireland. Lucy Mwase has worked for Habitat Malawi for 3 years, first as the Programmes Manager and currently as the Interim National Director since August 2020. Her role as Programmes Manager involves overseeing all programmes across Habitat Malawi, including the design, the planning, implementation, resource mobilisation, grants management, review and learning, and human resource management. Lucy, I thank you for sharing with us today, and we look forward to hearing what you're going to share with us now. And I'm going to hand over to you and allow you to share your screen so we can then hear all about the work that's going on currently in Malawi and into the future. Thank you, Lucy.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter, and welcome everyone. I'll start by sharing my screen. Please let me know when you are able to see it. I'm just going to enable my video for the sake of those who do not know me, but I'm sure if there are some who have been to Malawi before, I'm sure we've interacted in one way or the other. And in terms of our programs as a country in Malawi, I'm sure some of you are familiar with what we do as Habitat Malawi. So let me just oops. Okay, so hi. Okay, and I'm going to put it off for now as I make my presentation. Okay, so today on updates from Malawi, I'm going to share a bit of the support that you gave us for the COVID response, but also just to give you an update on what is happening on the ground. Just for your own information, that in Malawi, of course, we've had cases, COVID cases, but it hasn't been as serious as it has been in other countries. As such, life has been, I would say, 50% normal. So in terms of our work on the ground, we still continued our implementation, especially for the projects that had funding. And we're still continuing up to the time when the projects are supposed to come to an end. So in just a bit of an introduction, I just want to say on behalf of Habitat for Humanity Malawi, we are so grateful for your continued support that we receive, especially from Habitat Island. As I said, that we miss a lot the interaction, of course, the learning with the volunteers when they're in country. I remember every time the volunteers are in country, I would go and make a presentation on what is about our programs in Malawi, and then I would get feedback in terms of how we can do things better. So that learning and the interaction is what we're missing a lot. And we hope that life is going to get back to normal soon, so that we can welcome you back to Malawi. So we had 43 GV teams that were planned towards the end of FY20, but these were unable to travel this year, which means over 200 beneficiaries who had to wait for much needed homes, because every team would build a minimum of 2 houses, and each house will accommodate a minimum of 5 people. So we are looking at a huge number of beneficiaries that have been affected because of corona virus. But all in all, we are hoping that everything is going to get back to normal sooner than expected, so we can resume our builds. In terms of context about Malawi, I know you've read about Malawi on internet, everywhere else. So yeah, we are not proud about it, but yeah, we are still a poorest country in the world with a GDP of about 290. This was done in 2009. It's quite old. I think we need to get latest statistics. In terms of human population, is estimated at 19 million plus, with a 3.3% growth rate. And our population is largely youth, because 70% are younger people. But in terms of employment, unemployment rate is also very high at 40%. So just like in other country in sub-Saharan Africa, Malawi suffers the impacts of HIV and AIDS, with a prevalence of about 9.2%. This is a bit lower than a couple of years ago when it was about 14%. So, but it's still high, very high in sub-Saharan Africa. In terms of economy, our economy is agro-based, with 80% of people practicing subsistence farming. And in terms of housing needs, the needs is estimated at 80%. So about 80% of people in Malawi live in homes that are not in substandard homes. Yeah. So the Malawi, like the report that I was reading 2 weeks ago on progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, Malawi has done like 17% in terms of progress, but none of the targets were related to housing. But the good thing is government has acknowledged the need to construct decent houses, especially for vulnerable populations. And we're just looking forward to how they plan to do that. We'll be happy as Habitat to partner with government to support the vulnerable population with decent housing. Just a quick update on the COVID-19. As I said, so government of Malawi continues to enforce preventive measures to combat the COVID-19. So as such, we are operating from home. Even now I'm home since April. But in terms of the cases, as I said, we continue registering very few cases. As of yesterday, we had 58,000 people who had been tested, and out of which 5,864 were positive, and 183 had died, while 4,762 individuals have recovered. So if you look at even the recovery rate is also very high. If you come to Malawi today, life is almost 100% normal. You wouldn't believe there is COVID. Very few people putting on their masks and all that. And today I was checking on the statistics. I think 11 people were tested positive, but like last week we had 2 consecutive days where there was no one who tested positive. It's still a bit tricky situation for Malawi because you're not sure whether it's we don't have the disease, or we don't have the virus, or we are not testing enough people to get the numbers. So it's a bit 50-50 chance about COVID in Malawi. As we speak, government announced opening of all schools. So all schools are open, beginning from primary all the way to university. All schools are open in Malawi, and life is getting back to normal, as I said. In terms of the support that we received from Habitat Island, we plan to do the following, because what we want is to we pitched the support towards COVID response. So some of the interventions that we're planning to venture into as soon as the funding is in is to increase community engagement, to provide guidance to the communities on risks and preventions, signs and symptoms, because in most communities, especially the rural areas in Malawi, they still look at COVID as a taboo, or they will just say COVID is for people from maybe the cities, it's not for people from the rural. So there is that gap in terms of knowledge. So we want to make use of those funds to do a bit more of community engagement, but also hygiene promotion and community sensitization in relation to COVID-19. The other thing is we're talking of hygiene and advising people to wash hands with soap, but soap is very expensive for a vulnerable family. So what we're trying to do now is to try and promote soap making skills. So this is what we're going to do. We'll train community members on how they can make soap using local available resources, but also very cheap materials, so that at least every household has soap for washing hands. But again, with the government enforcing on the use of masks, masks on the Malawi market are very expensive, and you don't expect a vulnerable family to afford a mask. Definitely, they'll use the funds to buy food than buy a mask. So what we want to do is train the community members to use available resources to make their own masks that they can use to wear. But for schools, what we are planning to do is provide hand washing facilities for this grant. Of course, like for the other grants like BMZ, we are also providing water points in schools where there are no water points, because we can't talk about hygiene if the school does not have access to water. In terms of, we're still in need of support. I think the last time I was making a presentation to a different team, we highlighted some of the issues that affected us as a country program due to COVID, because our funding was reduced to less than 50%. So we as a country program, we highly affected, and like in terms of we had to scale down on national office expenses, and we closed a couple of offices as well, like the projects in Doha. I think if there are some of you who have been in Malawi and you had a build in Imponela, that office is closed. Same with Lilongwe. We also closed that project as well because of funding. And the other thing is we also have some projects in Salima. This was a project that was funded by the EU, the vocational skills training. I remember the volunteers who had been to Malawi, especially in Salima, they never missed visiting this site, and most of them liked it. I remember there were some who even offered to pay fees for these youths, but we are closing that center also down because of the same funding. So we still appeal to you for your support, and we just secured funding from the BMZ. This is a wash project for schools. We construct latrines and we train children in hand washing. We provide the water points and all that, but the funding comes with a condition of matching. So we normally match the BMZ funds. And this year we were supposed to match with, I think, over $150,000. So that's another gap that we're also looking at. Where do we get the funds to match? We really need this project because it's a wash. And this time around, we are funding both institutions. We're supporting both institutions as well as the communities. And in terms of timing, we feel like it's just the right timing for a wash project in Malawi. But again, we need to raise funds to be able to successfully implement the project. So we are therefore appealing for more support to continue reaching out to the most vulnerable populations who look up to us for a decent home as well as sustainable water points. And moving on to just to share a bit of some of our programs that are currently underway. We have our disaster risk reduction and response program. This is one of the biggest programs within Habitat Malawi. And at the moment, we have 5 active projects. I think we had 6 projects. The other one just ended last month. So now we have 5 active projects, and the major ones are funded by the UNDP in Zomba and Palombe. So with our DRRR program, we mainly focus on the districts that are affected by disaster, and our interventions in the DRRR program is that what we want is not just to build a house, but to also train local artisans. Because what we're looking at is we want the local artisans to understand what we mean by safer house construction, so they can construct houses that can withstand disaster. So what we do is we train them theory, and then once they are trained in classroom, we allocate the houses, especially for the most vulnerable people. So we allocate these houses. So we construct the houses as part of training. And once the houses are completed, we also try to follow them up and see whether they are putting into practice whatever they learned during the program. So we try to follow them up with the milestones that each artisan should train at least 10. Should construct 10 resilient houses. So that's the approach that we're using. But in addition, we also have a software element where we train our local structures in IPASA training, so that they take out the messages of safe house construction to the communities. We give them brochures. On the picture you see, those are some of the committee members. We also buy them bicycles, because each member has to cover a bigger area. So for them to be able to reach out to everyone else, we give them bikes, but we also buy them a couple of things in case of disaster, so they can alert people, the whistles, and then they blow and all that. So that's our disaster risk reduction and response program. In terms of response, when there is disaster, we also work hand in hand with different habitat offices to support people who have been affected by disaster. I will not go into the detail because the program, I think maybe we can have just time when we have time just to talk about in detail one of the program that we have. Otherwise, we have now we have 3 main programs. So the DRR, the WASH, as well as the vulnerable group housing. Moving on to outlook for the future. So we are committed to continue to serve the most vulnerable in Malawi. And we are currently developing a program strategy for DRR. So this is like our entry point, but our plan is to make sure that every program that we're implementing has a well-detailed program strategy to define what we want to do and how we go about it. And that will also feed into our fundraising strategy, because we know that there's been a gap in between since COVID came in, but we still have people that we are committed to support, and we want to start fundraising again for the different initiatives. We also want to continue collaborating with other implementing partners for greater impact. So recently we had an informal talk with our colleagues from World Food Program, because what we're looking at, if we can integrate housing in one community and livelihood, then the impact should be greater, because we've provided houses to people who are hungry and they don't have food. So they're sleeping in a house which is not leaking, is well roofed, is strong structure, but they don't have food. So in terms of impact, it's like we are at 50%. So what we want is to have that greater impact and make sure that as we're doing, we're supporting the communities on the other side, our partners are also supporting them on the other side. We also want to continue exploring means of making house construction cheaper. The other thing that came out so clearly in the SDG report is that constructing a house in Malawi is very expensive. And if people are living in some standard houses, it's not like they would wish to, but they just can't afford. So as Habitat, we've taken it up also to try and find means of reducing this cost on construction. And in my previous, during our previous meeting, we talked about the 3D house printing initiative. So we've partnered with 14 Trees. This is a subsidiary of Rafaj, the cement company. So they've come up with a machine that is printing a house. We are okay. So they will be starting soon. We are yet to see, but otherwise, according to the presentation, looks like it's going to be way cheaper than constructing, using the blocks like we do. So we are yet to see how cheap that is going to be. If it's going to be cheaper than what we do, then we're going to adopt it. But other than that, we're still finding other means on how we can reduce the cost of construction. And we'll also continue advocating for decent housing in different forums. But also the other thing that we've taken on board this year is the increase in community engagement, because we want the community to own the program. So like one of our projects in DRRR, what we're doing is we are not constructing houses for our beneficiaries. We are just supporting them to construct a resilient house. So we are providing the materials, but we let them do the job so that they should also own it. Sometimes when you build a house and you give to someone else, maybe they don't appreciate it. But I think they should also bring in their effort and appreciate the investment. I think that was it for today. Then I can welcome the questions.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That is a very informative presentation there. And as Lucy said, we're happy to take any questions that anyone has. So please do use the question at the Q&A button at the bottom or the chat function at the bottom there and type in your questions. We do have about 10-15 minutes for questions, so please do use that facility. I have some questions here myself about that have come in already previously. So if you're just going to ask one of those, just as give people time to come up with their questions there. And Lucy, you mentioned there about the local district offices that had to be closed, sadly, when we were cutting costs. What impact will that immediately bring? What's going to what impact will that have in those areas particularly?
Okay, so the impact is of course negative, just as I already shared. Like the district that we closed, the offices, the ones that were mainly relying on tithe funding, and those are some of the districts that we used to host our volunteers as well. So we had planned for this year that we'll be constructing, I think 10 if not 15 houses per district using tithe funds, but all those were put on hold. So in terms of impact, the impact is huge, because in some cases we had already identified beneficiaries to be supported, but everything had to be put on hold now. And I'm sure some of the beneficiaries might have seen others, the ones that we supported like the previous years, that each time we selected the volunteers, they approved, they get supported. But in this case, it means them waiting longer. Of course, we made a communication that because of COVID, so everyone understands when we say due to COVID, we have limitations in terms of funding, we'll not be able to support you now. They are able to understand. But in terms of impact, the negative impact is there. Because the other thing that what I was saying was we are now, Malawi rainy season starts in November, between November and December. So these are the people who had hope that maybe this coming rainy season they'll be safe. But yeah, their story remains the same, unchanged. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Questions come in there from Monica Lewis, and she says, thank you very much, first of all, for the very interesting presentation. And Monica has been one of our volunteers who's travelled with one of our local schools, Assumption Grammar, to Malawi on a couple of times. And she's asking in particular about the Mulanje office. Is that still open or has that been closed?
Okay, so the Mulanje office is open until 30th of November, of October. So the grant that we got is ending in 2 weeks, is next week, on 30th of October. And we, of course, we submitted a proposal to the donor, but we haven't received feedback as yet. So we made formal communication to staff that if we are not getting any more funding on this, then we are closing the office again. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Monica, for that question. Thank you, Lucy, for your answer there. Another question that's come in as well there is about what are the greatest challenges that Habitat Malawi are going to face in the next few months, just that we can be mindful in our thoughts and our prayers as we continue to think about you guys on a daily basis about the challenges that you face.
Okay, so just repeat again your question, challenges in terms of...
I think the question was just the kind of general challenges, Lucy, just, as in terms of programs. So obviously COVID-19 and the ongoing work there, but just, particular challenges that you want us to remember in prayer and remember in our thoughts as well, just as we continue to think about you guys. What are the kind of the big picture issues coming up?
Okay. So I think in Malawi, the challenges date back to April when we had registered the first case of COVID. And moving forward, the challenges are growing by, every time. I think I've just talked about the closure of offices. And again, if we are closing Mulanje, it means we only have 3 project offices operational. So the main challenges for us continues to be funding, because even now, in terms of fundraising, it's not easy to fundraise now. So funding remains the biggest challenge for Habitat Malawi. And again, the other thing is that we had committed to support these vulnerable people, so we will not be able to meet our commitment for the vulnerable people. So that's another challenge that we are foreseeing. In terms of project monitoring, the challenge is a bit reduced because, as I said, that in Malawi, life is a bit normal, so we are able to travel, to go to the project site, to visit and all that. But the other challenge that I foresee, and this is already impacting on us, is that there has been an increased market cost of construction materials, because with the closing of the borders, Malawi being a landlocked country, most of our things we import from our neighboring countries. And with the closing of the borders, there was a short supply of construction materials, and that impact for now the borders have been opened, but now the impact is still feeling it, I think maybe for the next 2 months or so. So there are still a couple of challenges. I was just like in one of our projects, we had to stop construction for some few days because we do not have supply, we do not have cement and all those things. So yeah. Basically, I think it will take time for life to get back to normal. And again, working from home in a setting like Malawi, where internet is not guaranteed, has also proved a very big challenge. And in terms of operation, we've been slightly slow because we are operating from home. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Another question that's coming through there from Louise. Thank you, Louise, for your question. Related again back to the district offices, will that mean if the district office is closed, will any projects stop in those areas, or is there still plans to have projects happening in those areas, even if there is no district office?
Okay, so when we close the district offices, it means everything closed. We close the projects, we close the offices, because we could not sustain the office and the projects. Yeah. So everything is closed.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it just shows you the challenges that, and sadly, Habitat families facing right across the world and having to make those very difficult decisions indeed. A question that's come in there as well is about, mentioned earlier on there about the SDGs. And can you just talk a little about how Habitat Malawi will continue to work, to attain those SDGs? In particular, I know you mentioned the government there have missed some of the targets on that, but have committed to talk about do more work in terms of housing, particularly for those vulnerable groups. What kind of things or plans are in place for that?
What kind of things are what?
What kind of things are in place? What are the plans to help continue that advocacy work?
Okay, so in terms of advocacy, is that we are part of the shelter cluster at national level, but we also participate in the urban forum. which focuses on the housing. So that's our entry point, because last year I remember we supported the Ministry of Housing to submit a position paper on housing. So our presence in those forums also helps us to advocate for what we think is right in terms of housing. Same with, so the good thing now is that this funding that we have from UNDP is one of the major donors that funds the government. So with this partnership with UNDP, already we are working directly with government and also appreciate the need for decent housing. So we feel that this is also strategic to help us advocate for decent housing. Like next week, the government officials, after reading some of the reports that from the field, they were interested and they would like to visit our project site. So they'll be visiting our project site on Monday together with the team from UNDP, just to appreciate what we're doing on the ground. So that's very good. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Lucy. And just in conclusion there, just to thank yourself, Lucy. I know you're very, very busy schedule, and for taking out the time to give us this very informative presentation and for answering the questions. If anyone does have any other questions, please do, you can email them into ourselves and we will follow those up if you have any questions at a later stage. But it's always fantastic to hear from our colleagues and our friends who are directly in the field there, and to hear about the context and the different challenges that they do face, not just because of COVID, but also as we look to the future as well, as we try to ensure a world where everyone has a decent and safe place to live. So thank you, Lucy, for taking time out of your afternoon to do that for us today. And as well, just to say thank you, listeners and panelists, for joining us today. If you have missed any of our previous updates from the field, these can be found on our website, Habitat Ireland, or on YouTube at the channel Habitat for Humanity Ireland. And there you'll see some of the previous updates from the field that we've had over the last couple of months. So just all that's left for me to say is to say a massive thank you to Lucy for taking part, and just thank you everyone for also giving up your time this afternoon, and do stay safe and enjoy the rest of your afternoon as well. So thank you everyone, and again we will speak soon. Thanks, Lucy.